I speak 9 languages, the black cleaning lady's son declared. The Arab millionaire, Hassan al-Mansouri, erupted in laughter, a booming sound that filled his Manhattan penthouse office like a predator's roar. Ha ha! 9 languages? Kid, you can barely speak English. 14-year-old David Johnson, clutching a well-worn public school backpack, met Hassan's gaze steadily, despite the flush of humiliation creeping up his cheeks. Beside him, his mother, Grace Johnson, 42, held a cleaning bucket, her hands trembling. She knew bringing David to work had been a mistake. Hassan al-Mansouri, a 48-year-old oil tycoon presiding over a $3.5 billion empire, was having the most entertaining day he'd had in weeks. This kid, the cleaning lady's son, claimed to be fluent in 9 languages when Hassan doubted he could even finish a book in English. David, please apologize to Mr. al-Mansouri, Grace whispered, her voice weighed down by years of submission and the fear of losing the job that single-handedly supported her 2 children. No need for apologies, Hassan said, relishing the moment. I want to hear more of this fantasy. Tell me, boy wonder, what are these 9 languages you supposedly speak? David took a deep breath. At 14, he already understood the world judged people like him and his mother before they even had a chance. Son of a cleaning lady, black, living in the Bronx, labels men like Hassan used to justify their condescension. English, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, and Portuguese, David replied calmly. Each word was delivered with such clarity that Hassan's laughter faltered for a second. Liar, Hassan declared, turning back to his Italian marble desk. Grace, your son has some serious delusion problems. Maybe you should take him to a psychiatrist instead of bringing him here. Grace lowered her head, feeling the familiar sting of humiliation. For 5 years, she had cleaned that office, enduring demeaning remarks and accepting meager wages because she needed that job. But seeing her son, her bright, determined David, subjected to this kind of ridicule was a pain that cut deeper than any personal insult she had endured. Mom, David said softly, touching her arm. It's okay. Hassan watched the interaction with a cruel smile. He thrived on these moments of absolute power when he could remind people of their place in the social hierarchy. He had built his empire not just through sharp business instincts, but through a calculated ruthlessness that crushed anyone who dared to challenge him. You know what I think, Grace? Hassan leaned back in his $15,000 leather chair. I think your son is jealous of the kids of my executives, who attend expensive private schools, so he invents these fantasies to make himself feel special. Sir, David interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying a dignity that surprised Hassan. Do you speak Arabic? Hassan frowned. Of course I do. It's my native language. Then you would understand if I said, Khalat al-Hakika, David stated. The silence that followed was profound. Hassan stared at David, processing the perfectly articulated words in classical Arabic he had just heard. This wasn't tourist-level Arabic anyone could memorize. It was a complex structure with advanced grammar and flawless pronunciation. Grace looked from her son to Hassan, sensing a shift in the atmosphere but not understanding what David had said. Where did you learn that? Hassan asked, genuinely perplexed for the first time in years. David smiled for the first time since entering the office. At the public library, sir. They have free language programs every afternoon. Hassan felt a strange sensation stirring within him, a mixture of surprise and something akin to respect. No, that was impossible. He was just a kid who had memorized a few phrases. Anyone can memorize a phrase, Hassan said, trying to regain his composure. That doesn't mean you speak the language. You're right, sir, David agreed. That's why I brought this. David opened his worn backpack and produced a document that made Hassan's breath catch in his throat. It was an official certificate of proficiency in multiple languages issued by Columbia University, with grades indicating fluency in all 9 languages David had mentioned. That's fake, Hassan stammered, his voice losing its earlier conviction. David produced another piece of paper. This is my certificate from the Advanced Linguistics program at the Municipal Library, and this is from the online simultaneous translation course I completed last month. Hassan took the documents with trembling hands. They were all authentic, stamped and signed by reputable institutions. This 14-year-old kid, the cleaning lady's son, had achieved a level of education that rivaled professional diplomats. How? Was all Hassan could whisper. What Hassan didn't know was that David Johnson held a secret far greater than his fluency in 9 languages. A secret that was about to shatter everything Hassan thought he knew about intelligence, merit, and the true worth of people. If you're eager to uncover how a 14-year-old managed to outsmart a billionaire and discover the devastating secret he was still concealing, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hassan was unaware that David's appearance in his office wasn't by chance. For months, he had meticulously planned this moment, gathering information and preparing a demonstration that would not only transform Hassan's perception of him but also expose a truth about Hassan himself. A truth that would dismantle everything the billionaire believed about himself. Hassan scrutinized the certificates for several minutes, desperately seeking any sign of forgery. But the more he examined them, the more his arrogance gave way to something approaching panic. The signatures were genuine, the stamps official, the dates consistent with a 3-year academic progression. That still doesn't prove anything, Hassan muttered, more to himself than to David. Anyone can take online courses. You're right, David agreed, his calmness making Hassan even more uneasy. That's why I brought this. David pulled a tablet from his backpack and opened a video chat app. Within seconds, the screen displayed an Asian woman in an academic office. Professor Chin, David said in perfect Mandarin, could you confirm to Mr. Almangsuri my performance in your business translation course? The woman on the screen replied in rapid, fluent Mandarin. Hassan didn't understand a word, but he could discern the natural flow of the conversation, the complexity of the grammatical structures, the effortless way David navigated between different linguistic registers. Mr. Almangsuri. The professor switched to English. David has been my best student in 15 years of teaching. At 14, his Mandarin fluency is comparable to a native of Beijing. He is truly extraordinary. Hassan abruptly ended the call, his hands trembling slightly. Grace, he said, his voice oddly subdued. Did you know about this? Grace shook her head, still trying to process what was happening. David has always been smart, sir, but I didn't know I started when I was 11, David interrupted softly. My mom was working 2 jobs to pay for my private school, but she lost her second job due to the pandemic. When I went back to public school, the classes were too easy. So, I decided to use my free time constructively. Hassan felt a knot tightening in his stomach. While his own children were attending the most exclusive schools in New York, with private tutors costing hundreds of dollars an hour, this boy had surpassed them all using only public libraries and his own sheer determination. But why languages? Hassan asked, genuinely curious for the first time. Because I wanted to understand the world, David replied simply. And because I realized that when you speak to people in their language, they stop seeing you as a stranger and start seeing you as a human being. The observation struck Hassan like a blow to the gut. For years, he had used his Arab heritage as an excuse to distance himself from his American employees, citing cultural differences when the truth was simply his own arrogance. David, Hassan said slowly, you're 14 years old. That's impossible, sir. David smiled for the first time since arriving. The impossible is just the possible that hasn't happened yet. Hassan turned, looking at Grace for the first time in 5 years. He saw a woman who had raised a genius while working grueling jobs, who had sacrificed everything to give her son opportunities. David, Hassan said, his voice shifting in tone. Why did you come here today? Your mother could lose her job. David exchanged a glance with Grace, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Because I overheard you on the phone yesterday, David said calmly. You were discussing a contract in Arabic with investors from the Middle East, but you made mistakes that could cost you millions. Hassan turned pale. What kind of mistakes? You used mubashir when you should have used urgent, and you confused miraik with miraib when discussing deadlines. Small mistakes that completely changed the meaning. Hassan sat down heavily. Those investors had seemed confused during the call, but he had attributed it to connection issues. In reality, his linguistic blunders had nearly jeopardized a $50 million deal. "How did you know I was making mistakes?" Hassan asked. "Because I've been studying business Arabic for 2 years," David replied. "It's my specialty." Hassan looked at David with new eyes. This kid was an expert in international business communication at the age of 14. "David," Hassan said slowly, "you saved my business without me even knowing it." "Actually," David said, pulling another document from his backpack, "I did more than that." Hassan took the paper. It was a detailed proposal for restructuring the company's international communications, identifying linguistic flaws that had cost them contracts and suggesting specific solutions. "You analyzed my company?" Hassan whispered. "Just public communications," David explained. "Press releases, transcripts, online documents. I found patterns of mistakes that explain lost business." Hassan read it twice. It was brilliant, detailed, and potentially worth hundreds of millions in recovered contracts. "Why did you do that?" Hassan asked, genuinely bewildered. David took a deep breath. "Because I wanted to show you that value isn't about your parents' money. It's about what you can contribute." Hassan felt something inside him begin to crack. For years, he had operated under the assumption that success was hereditary, that intelligence was a privilege afforded to the upper class. This kid had utterly shattered that belief. "Hassan al-Mansouri," David said, using his full name for the first time. "Can I ask you a question?" Hassan nodded. "If a kid like me can do this using public libraries, what could other young people like me accomplish with the same opportunities your kids have?" The question hung in the air like a loaded bomb. Hassan didn't realize that David's demonstration was merely the opening act, because concealed within that beat-up backpack was a recording that would prove Hassan had lost multi-million-dollar contracts not due to simple linguistic incompetence, but because of something far more insidious. And David was about to use that evidence in a way that would permanently alter the power dynamic in that office. Hassan was still grappling with David's devastating question when the boy produced one final item from his backpack, a small digital recorder that sent a chill down the billionaire's spine. "Before I answer your question," David said calmly, "I need to show you something." David pressed play. Hassan's unmistakable voice filled the office. "These black Americans are all the same, lazy, uneducated, always blaming others for their failures. That's why I only hire Arabs and whites for important positions." Grace covered her mouth in horror. Hassan went ashen. Where did you record this?" Hassan stammered. "In the elevator last week," David replied emotionlessly. "You were talking to your vice president about hiring policy. You didn't notice I was there." Hassan remembered the conversation vividly. He had been with Robert Chun, arguing about the lack of black employees in executive roles. He thought they were alone. "That's illegal. You can't record private conversations." Hassan exploded. "New York is a one-party consent state," David replied calmly. "Perfectly legal. And considering it documents systematic racial discrimination, I'm sure the Labor Department would be very interested." Hassan felt the world starting to spin. A recording like this could destroy his company, trigger multi-million-dollar lawsuits, and permanently ruin his reputation. "What do you want?" Hassan whispered. David smiled. It wasn't a childish smile, but the smile of someone who had meticulously planned every move of a chess game. "I want you to choose," David said, walking over to Hassan's desk. "You can continue to believe that people like me and my mother are inferior, and this recording will end up on the desk of every journalist and labor lawyer in New York." Hassan swallowed hard. Or you can prove that you actually learned something today. I want you to promote my mother to facility supervisor with a salary of $80,000 a year. I want a scholarship program for young people from disadvantaged communities. And I want you to hire me as a junior language consultant. You're 14 years old, Hassan protested. And I speak 9 languages better than any adult you know, David retorted. Besides, I've already proven I can save your company millions. Hassan looked at Grace, who remained silent, but whose eyes shone with pride and a dignity he had never noticed before. "Grace," Hassan said, his voice cracking. You've raised a genius. I've raised a man, Grace replied firmly. A man who knows his worth and won't accept being treated as anything less. David produced a contract from his backpack. I've already prepared the terms. You have 5 minutes to decide before this recording goes public. Hassan took the contract with trembling hands. It was detailed, professional, and included clauses that protected both David and Grace from any future retaliation. The boy had thought of everything. How do I know you won't release the recording even if I sign? Hassan asked. Because unlike you, David said, looking Hassan directly in the eye, I believe in giving second chances to people who genuinely want to change. Hassan reread the contract. The demands were fair, even conservative, considering the value David could bring to the company. But signing meant admitting he had been wrong about everything. What if I don't sign? Hassan asked, already knowing the answer. David took out his cell phone. This recording will go to the New York Times, CNN, and the Attorney General's office in exactly. He glanced at his watch. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. You're blackmailing me, Hassan said. I'm offering you justice, David corrected. You've spent years benefiting from an unjust system. Now you have the chance to be part of the solution. Hassan gazed out the window at Manhattan, the city he had conquered through a combination of intelligence and ruthless cruelty. But this kid had just outmaneuvered him on both fronts. Grace, Hassan said softly, do you accept the promotion? Grace looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. I accept, sir. Hassan picked up a solid gold pen and signed the contract. David Johnson, he said, you just taught me the most expensive and most valuable lesson of my life. What lesson? David asked. That real intelligence isn't about where you were born or how much money you have. It's about what you do with the opportunities you create for yourself. David put away the tape recorder and extended his hand to Hassan. Welcome to the 21st century, Mr. Al-Mansouri. Hassan shook the boy's hand, feeling like he was agreeing to much more than a simple employment contract. He was committing to seeing the world through entirely different eyes. At that moment, David did something unexpected. He pulled 2 more recorders out of his backpack. For your information, David said casually, everything that happened here today was also recorded, including you signing this contract of your own free will. Hassan laughed for the first time in years. Not a cruel laugh, but one of genuine admiration. You're frighteningly smart, kid. No, David smiled. I just prepared better. Hassan thought he had learned the most important lesson of his life, but David had one last surprise in store. A revelation that would expose not only the extent of his planning but also a secret from Hassan's own past. A secret that would reshape everything the billionaire thought he knew about his origins and the true meaning of merit. 6 months later, Hassan Al-Mansouri sat at a round table in the Bronx Public Library, surrounded by young people from disadvantaged communities participating in the scholarship program David had demanded. The man who once viewed public libraries as symbols of failure now considered them havens of educational excellence. Mr. Al-Mansouri, Maria, a 15-year-old Latina girl, asked, "Is it true that David got his first job at age 14 by blackmailing you?" Hassan laughed heartily. "It's true, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me." David, now 15 and officially the youngest language consultant in American corporate history, watched from the desk nearby, where he reviewed international contracts worth millions. In 6 months, his corrections and suggestions had generated $200 million in new business for Al-Mansouri Industries. "Tell the whole story," Maria urged. Hassan glanced at Grace, who, dressed in elegant suits as a facility supervisor, had become one of the most respected executives in the company. She smiled, encouraging him to proceed. "6 months ago, I was a rich but miserable man," Hassan began. "I thought my money made me superior to other people. Then David taught me that true intelligence has nothing to do with where you were born, but with what you do with the opportunities you create." "But how did he know it would work?" asked Carlos, a 13-year-old boy now studying programming thanks to the program. David looked up from the contracts. "Because I researched Hassan for months. I found out that he had grown up as a poor immigrant in Lebanon, arrived in the United States at 16 without speaking English very well, and built his empire from scratch. Hassan nodded. David showed me that I had forgotten my own origins, that I had become exactly the kind of person who discriminated against me when I was young. And now, Maria asked, "Now our company is the most diverse in the industry," Grace replied proudly. "We hire talent based on competence, not last name or zip code." Hassan stood up and walked over to a wall displaying the certificates of the first 50 beneficiaries of the David Johnson Young Talent Program. "Do you know what the greatest discovery I've ever made is?" "What is it?" they asked in unison. "That when you invest in talented people, regardless of their background, they don't just grow, they make you grow too." David closed his laptop and joined the group. Hassan al-Mansouri had every opportunity in the world, but he almost wasted the greatest one of all. The opportunity to be a decent person. "What about you?" Carlos asked David. "Weren't you afraid of failing?" "Of course I was," David admitted. "But my mother taught me that the biggest failure is accepting being treated as less than you are worth. I preferred to risk everything rather than remain invisible." Hassan looked at David with genuine admiration. "The most impressive thing wasn't that he spoke 9 languages or analyzed my company. It was that he had the courage to confront a powerful man knowing that it could destroy his own family's life." "But you had a plan, right?" Maria insisted. David smiled. "Always have a plan, and always have evidence to back up your position." Grace stood up. "It's time to go, David. We have a meeting with Japanese investors in an hour." Hassan turned to the young people. "Want to know the best part of the story? David now makes more than I did at his age, not through inheritance or privilege, but through sheer merit." As they walked to the company car, a Mercedes that Grace now drove as an executive, Hassan reflected on the complete transformation of his life. "David," he said, "I have a confession to make." "What is it?" "You didn't just save my company, you saved my soul." David stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "I was becoming a monster, rich, powerful, but completely empty inside. You forced me to remember that true success is when you use your privilege to lift others up, not to tear them down." Grace kissed her son's forehead. "I'm proud of you, baby, not for the money or recognition, but for the man you're becoming. And I," Hassan added, "am honored to have learned from both of you that family isn't about blood. It's about people who make you want to be better." That afternoon, during the meeting with the Japanese investors, David simultaneously translated negotiations that resulted in a $500 million deal. Hassan watched, remembering the day he had mocked that same boy. After the meeting, a Forbes reporter approached them. "Mr. al-Mansouri, how does it feel to be the first billionaire CEO to have a 15-year-old advisor?" Hassan smiled. "I feel like I finally understand the true meaning of leadership. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about recognizing and nurturing the intelligence of others." "And you, David, what's your advice to other young people?" David considered the question carefully. "Never let anyone define your worth based on appearances or circumstances. Your origins don't determine your destiny. And always have evidence to back up your claims." "One last question," the journalist said. "Do you believe this story can inspire others?" Grace replied, "This story proves that when you combine talent with opportunity and courage with preparation, there is no limit to what can happen." Hassan nodded. "David taught me that true wealth is not in what you accumulate, but in what you build, and that the smartest investment you can make is in human potential." David's story demonstrates that genuine intelligence transcends color, social class, and age. If this journey of courage and justice has inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that underscore how knowledge is the one weapon no one can ever take away from you. Hassan had tried to use his wealth to belittle those he deemed inferior. But he discovered that he had drastically underestimated the power of a brilliant, well-prepared mind. He learned that genuine influence stems not from the money you possess but from the people you invest in, and that sometimes the most profound lessons in life come from the individuals you least expect.